Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, well, we're wrapping up our multi-part exploration into the origins of the modern UFO phenomenon.
That's right. We've covered a lot of ground early sightings, public reaction, the initial government responses.
And for this final part, we're going straight to the source, or, as close as we can get the paper trail, official FBI documents.
And these aren't just dusty old files. They're really snapshots, right? Snapshots of how official channels grappled with something truly, well, unidentified.
Exactly. We're talking early reports, raw eyewitness stuff, those first, often kind of bewildered government reactions from 47 onwards. This is where the mystery really met the military.
And where secrecy started to take flight, you could say.
Yeah, pretty much. Our mission today is to explore how it all kicked off, using the FBI's own records as our guide, history through the lens of the unexplained.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how these early files set the stage for everything that followed. They lay the groundwork for the whole modern UFO narrative.
You mean the questions they were asking back then?
Exactly. The foundational questions, the official responses, or sometimes the lack of response. You can see echoes of it decades later. We'll see how everyone, from the public right up to top government committees, really struggled. They were trying to make sense of something completely outside their known frameworks.
Okay, let's dive in. We should probably start right at the beginning with what was actually landing on the FBI's desk. What was their official policy? How did they react initially? Let's get into the Bureau's desk FBI's early encounters with the phenomenon through official documentation and policy.
Right, so looking through these documents, one thing becomes clear almost immediately. There's this remarkably consistent policy statement.
Which was?
That unidentified flying objects are, quote, not within the jurisdiction of the FBI, end quote. It pops up again and again.
So J. Edgar Hoover himself was saying this.
Directly, yeah. There are letters from Hoover stating this very clearly. We found one from February 20th, 1967, for example. It's thanking someone, a Fred Stickling, for offering to show a film.
A UFO film.
Presumably. But Hoover writes, and I'm quoting again, although I would like to be of assistance, matters pertaining to unidentified flying objects are not within the jurisdiction of the FBI. Very direct.
Wow. Okay, so flat out not our job.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It wasn't a one-off either. It seems to have been the standard line, the bureaucratic response they used consistently over the years.
So hold on. America's top domestic security agency, the FBI, famous for investigating, well, everything. They're just saying, nope, not us when it comes to UFOs.
That's the official line, yes.
But why were people sending reports to the FBI then, if it wasn't their job? That seems like the first big question these files raise, doesn't it?
It really does, and it highlights a really crucial bureaucratic boundary. The FBI's main focus, their mandate, was internal security. Espionage, sabotage, domestic threats.
Right, G-men stuff.
Exactly. Investigating strange lights in the sky, or what people started calling flying saucers, just didn't fit into their established role.
But they kept getting the reports anyway.
Endlessly. Which speaks volumes about the situation back then. It was chaotic. There wasn't one clear place for the public to report these things.
So people just wrote to whoever they thought might listen, or had some authority.
Pretty much. Imagine seeing something truly baffling in the sky. Who do you call? There wasn't a dedicated UFO hotline, so people contacted agencies they knew, agencies with investigative power. And the FBI was, well, very prominent.
Makes sense. They were the famous investigators.
Right. So they became this kind of default contact point for a lot of confused and concerned citizens. This lack of a clear designated authority is really fundamental to understanding the early government response. Or perhaps the lack of a coordinated response.
Great. So if the FBI wasn't investigating these directly, they weren't just throwing the reports in the trash, were they? You said they forwarded them.
Correct. Their policy wasn't to ignore them entirely, even while denying jurisdiction. They consistently forwarded UFO-related letters, reports, communications to other government agencies.
And mostly two.
Primarily the Department of the Air Force. Time and time again, you see memos indicating referrals to the Air Force. Specifically, to their Office of Special Investigations, the OSI, and the Inspector General.
Ah, the OSI, okay.
Yeah. That same 1967 Hoover letter we mentioned, it explicitly states, inasmuch as your communication is of interest to another governmental agency, I am referring one copy of it to the Director of Special Investigations, the Inspector General, Department of the Air Force, and gives the address.
So a clear paper trail leading from the FBI straight to Air Force intelligence.
A very clear pipeline, yes.
Was it only the Air Force getting these referrals? I thought I saw something about the CIA, too.
Yes, the CIA comes up, though less often in the context of standard UFO reports. There's one memo from 1959. It details someone walking into the Miami FBI office.
Just walked in.
Apparently so. Volunteering to go back to Austria as an intelligence agent. In that specific case, the FBI provided the individual with the Washington, D.C. address for CIA headquarters for his inquiry.
Okay, so they routed things based on the content. UFO sightings went to the Air Force. Potential intelligence matters, maybe, to the CIA.
It seems that way. The Air Force was definitely the main destination for the bulk of the UFO reports, but they directed information elsewhere if it seemed more appropriate for another agency's purview, like intelligence or foreign matters.
What's really interesting here, though, is that even though the FBI was saying, not our job, this act of forwarding the reports, it does suggest something, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that while they weren't claiming jurisdiction, they did acknowledge the potential significance of these reports.
They weren't just dismissing them as crackpot letters.
Exactly. They were routing potentially sensitive information to the relevant military intelligence or defense branches. It points to an underlying government interest, or at least concern, even if the FBI wasn't the agency doing the investigating.
And this division of labor, with the Air Force taking the lead, that had long-term consequences.
Absolutely. This early setup, this bureaucratic redirection, really defined the official government approach to UFOs for decades. It led directly to things like Project Blue Book.
The Air Force's big public UFO investigation project.
Right. That became the main public-facing effort. It set the precedent. UFOs became primarily a military matter, at least officially, steering the whole narrative away from domestic agencies like the FBI and keeping it firmly within the defense sphere.
Okay, building on that, let's look at how the FBI framed its own limited role. This idea of fact-finding versus evaluation. They kept saying they were strictly a fact-finding agency. What does that actually mean in practice when you're dealing with reports of flying saucers?
It's a crucial distinction. When the FBI said they were strictly a fact-finding agency, they meant their job was to collect information reports, testimonies, letters, without making official judgments about it.
So they wouldn't say if a witness was credible or if a sighting seemed real.
Not in an official evaluation, though. Their policy was to gather the data, the raw facts as reported, but not to evaluate the source's integrity or draw conclusions about the nature of the reported phenomenon itself.
Is there a specific document that lays this out?
Yes, quite clearly. A letter from Hoover dated March 19, 1954, responding to some request, states, and again I quote, "This Bureau is strictly a fact-finding agency and does not make evaluations or draw conclusions as to the character or integrity of any individual or organization."
And it mentioned confidentiality too.
It did. It added that data appearing in FBI files are confidential and available for official use only. So collect, keep it confidential, don't evaluate. That was the policy.
Okay, so this just the facts approach. It seems neutral on the surface, but you could read it in different ways, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. This policy is arguably the FBI's most significant, maybe unintentional, contribution to UFO history. Because by refusing to evaluate or dismiss,
They ended up preserving everything.
they became an impartial repository for some incredibly strange claims. It means these files contain this raw, unfiltered slice of public encounters with the unexplained, including the truly fantastic stuff, simply because the Bureau's rules force them to collect it, not judge it.
So one way to see it is they were just sticking to their rules, being objective data collectors.
Right. Bureaucratic procedure. We collect information. We don't analyze this type of information. We pass it on or file it. That's one interpretation.
But the other way?
The other way to see it is as a strategic move, a way for the FBI to keep its distance from a really controversial, often ridiculed topic.
Without having to actually deny that something weird was happening.
Exactly. They could collect the reports, pass them along, and maintain that they weren't investigating UFOs per se, just handling public correspondence according to procedure. It allowed them to create this paper trail confirming public interest and official awareness without ever endorsing the phenomenon itself.
Right.
A very careful balancing act.
That neutrality is fascinating. Okay, let's pivot from policy to the people involved. Let's get into the witness files' personal accounts and their impact. And maybe start with the tools they used. Forms for reporting a glimpse into early investigation protocols. These weren't just scribbled notes, were they?
No, far from it. These forms are incredibly revealing. They show a serious, structured attempt, at least internally, to standardize the data being collected on these baffling reports.
Like a police report for a UFO.
Almost, yeah. They wanted specific, granular details. For instance, the forms asked for the precise date of observation and exact time, then the place, even requesting map coordinates.
Map coordinates, wow.
Oh, yeah. They wanted to know the position of observer, air, car, building, specific location, and what attracted attention to object, trying to get the initial context.
What else did they ask about the object itself?
Absolutely. Number of objects and sketch of formation or grouping, suggesting interest in patterns or multiple craft. Then, apparent size, but with specific instructions. Compare to known object, for example, sun, moon, thumb, or fist at arm length.
Trying to get objective scale, not just it was big.
Exactly. Also, color of object, shape, again, asking for a graphic description in comparison to known objects. Altitude, using angles of elevation. Direction from observer, clockwise from north. Distance from observer.
They were really trying to pin it down scientifically or at least systematically?
It seems that way. They asked about speed, calculated by time to cover a given distance, even sound and odor. And if there was a trail, its color, length, width, how long it lasted.
Sound and odor, that's specific. What about how it looked, how it moved?
Yep. Luminosity, was it reflecting light, glowing on its own? How bright? Did it have projections like fins, wings, rods, and canopies? And crucially, maneuvers, turns, climbs, dives, even asking for a sketch of the flight path.
Maneuvers suggest they were looking for intelligent control, right? Not just a weather balloon drifting.
That seems implied, yes. They also asked about the manner of disappearance, any effect on clouds, weather conditions, and, importantly, additional information concerning objects.
And they wanted info on the observer, too.
Yes, name and address of observer plus occupation and hobbies. But it went further. There was a section for the investigators' comments.
Comments on what?
Comments of interrogator relative to intelligence and character of observer, with prompts suggesting background checks, check neighbors, police jets, FBI records, employer.
Whoa, so they were checking up on the witnesses, assessing reliability.
It certainly looks that way. It suggests a real concern about sorting credible reports from potential hoaxes or misidentifications right from the start. These forms paint a picture of an agency trying very hard to bring order to chaos, collecting detailed data even while publicly keeping its distance.
Okay, so they had these very clinical forms. But the experiences people reported were often anything but clinical. Which brings us to the contactees and royal encounters. George Adamski and Queen Juliana. This is where things get, well, pretty wild.
Yeah. Wild is a good word for it. The files definitely touch upon some really sensational accounts that blur the lines between just seeing something and claiming actual direct contact.
And George Adamski is probably the most famous early example.
Absolutely. He was a hugely prominent figure in the contactee movement. Adamski didn't just claim to see flying saucers. He claimed he'd met the occupants, human-looking beings from space.
The Space Brothers, he called them.
That's right. He said they came from Venus, Saturn, other planets in our solar system, traveling these flying saucers. There's a document in the files about his Gamma Exinski Foundation, seems like a typo for Adamski, describing his talks about these visitations to this planet by human beings from outer space. He even claimed to have photos and film.
And the Queen Juliana story, that's in the FBI files too. A reigning European monarch meeting with a guy who says he chats with Venusians.
It is mentioned, yes. It's quite extraordinary. According to one document, Adamski himself recounted having a requested meeting and audience with Queen Juliana of the Netherlands at Soestdijk Palace in May 1959.
Requested by whom? Him or her?
The document implies the request came to him, suggesting the palace initiated it, though the details aren't fully clear. He was on a world lecture tour at the time.
So what did Adamski say happened?
He apparently told an audience later at a lecture in The Hague that he was late because he'd had long interviews at the palace. He spoke very highly of her, saying, "The queen was very kind, and if there were more people like her, the world would be a better place to live in."
And the audience reaction.
According to Adamski's account of the document, a tremendous burst of applause took place after he said that. It clearly shows the public fascination and the kind of buzz this apparent royal interest generated.
Incredible. Whether the queen took him seriously or was just curious, that meeting must have massively boosted Adamski's profile and the whole idea of contactees.
Oh, undoubtedly. It added this layer of, well, almost surreal legitimacy, or at least notoriety. The document also mentions courageous Danes who had supposedly met these brothers and sisters, showing his influence was international. There's even reference to an open letter addressed to Your Majesty from Adamski's organization, indicating how seriously they took these claims and their perceived global implications.
It really illustrates that blend of sensationalism and high-level curiosity, doesn't it? It shifted the conversation beyond just lights in the sky.
Completely. It moved into the realm of active, intelligent contact, potential messages for humanity, this idea of benevolent visitors. It was a huge moment for the developing UFO narrative, injecting both excitement and a ton of controversy.
So from these high-profile, almost fantastical claims, the files also document much more personal and often deeply disturbing incidents. Let's look at unexplained incidents. Missing time, strange objects, and crashes.
Right. These are accounts that go beyond a simple sighting into something much more bizarre and often unsettling for the witness.
Like the missing time phenomenon.
Exactly. There's a report about an anonymous individual in Miami back in 1959. He claimed he was somehow transported by this craft for an undetermined distance and returned to his point of takeoff approximately 1 hour later.
Transported. How?
The report doesn't say how, just that he claimed this happened. It notes he spoke in a coherent manner, although he appeared to be under certain emotional strain. And here's the key part. He was unable to account for the time between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m.
8 hours, just gone. That's terrifying. And that term, missing time, became a hallmark of later abduction reports, didn't it?
It did. Finding it in these early FBI files is quite significant. It shows this aspect of the phenomenon was present right from the beginning, adding this deeply psychological, almost traumatic dimension.
And the files don't mention any kind of follow-up or support for this guy, just the report.
Just the report, as far as this document shows. It's raw data collection. Then there are incidents involving strange objects found on the ground.
Like potential debris.
Sort of.
Mm-hmm.
There's a case from Oklahoma City, July 1950. A man calls the police and the FBI multiple times. He'd found this metallic corrugated ball, slightly larger than a baseball, with a wire attached to it in his yard.
Did he think it was from a flying saucer?
Interestingly, no. The report says he didn't initially think it was a flying saucer, just that he didn't know what it was. The interviewer noted the man seemed under the influence of liquor, but the man himself apparently concluded it was probably part of a weather balloon system.
So ambiguity, maybe alcohol, maybe a rational explanation. It's messy.
Very messy. It highlights how people, even when finding something unusual, tried to fit it into known categories. But the fact it warranted multiple calls and an FBI report is interesting in itself.
And they're more dramatic events, too. Explosions, strange shapes.
Yes. A report from Valdez, North Carolina describes a glowing blue thing exploding overhead, lighting up the whole town like a giant flashbulb. That sounds pretty intense.
Definitely not a weather balloon.
Seems unlikely. And then there's one from Warminster, England. A council worker saw a silvery, cigar-shaped object drifting. He said it seemed to stretch, then suddenly divide amidships with a flash of orange light.
Divide. Like break in two.
That's how it's described.
Yeah.
And the really odd detail, no noise, a dramatic visual event, but complete silence.
That lack of sound is a recurring theme in some reports, isn't it? Adds to the strangeness.
It really does. So these accounts, whether influenced by stress, alcohol, or just genuine perplexity, show the truly baffling nature of what people were reporting. These weren't just distant lights. They were close encounters, missing time, strange objects, events that profoundly affected individuals and challenged their and the investigators' sense of reality.
Okay, so we've seen the policy, the forms, the personal accounts ranging from contactees to missing time. Now let's get to the stuff that's harder to dismiss. Radar contacts and visual confirmations, often involving military personnel in sensitive locations like Oak Ridge, Roswell, and beyond. This is where mystery met military head-on.
Absolutely. These reports are particularly compelling because they involve trained observers, often military or scientific personnel, and sometimes technological corroboration like radar. They're harder to wave away as misidentification.
Let's start with Oak Ridge. That's a hugely significant location, right? Center of atomic research.
Exactly, a highly sensitive national security site. And the files detail the series of events there from October 12th to 16th, 1950. Numerous unidentified objects appeared on radar screens, both Air Force radar and at the nearby McGee-Tyson Airport in Knoxville.
Where are these objects?
Near the northern edge of the Oak Ridge controlled area. The radar tracked them moving at 125 miles per hour at altitudes between 1,000 and 5,000 feet. The radar returns also showed varying densities.
So, multiple objects tracked over several days near a top-secret nuclear facility. That alone is significant. But there were visual sightings, too.
Yes, and by AEC's security patrol troopers. Trusted personnel. Names like Edward D. Reiner, John Moneymaker, Joe Zarzecki are mentioned.
What did they see?
They described objects changing colors, red to amber to white, then green, blue, orange, moving gently, horizontally. One trooper specifically described a bowl-shaped object with a projection on top.
And were these troopers considered reliable?
Highly. The reports emphasized their reliability. Trooper Reiner apparently said he wouldn't have even reported it if he hadn't had a witness. Moneymaker was noted as being reluctant to give information because of the fantastic nature of what he saw.
Understandable.
And the report explicitly highlights the simultaneous witnessing of the objects with repeated radar sightings and mentions Reiner was one of the better and most respected troopers. This isn't just anecdotal. It's documented, corroborated observation by credible witnesses at a critical site.
That Oak Ridge case seems incredibly strong. Then, of course, there's Roswell. The name itself is iconic. What do the FBI files say about Roswell?
The FBI files do mention Roswell, which is fascinating in itself, though the details are a bit different from the later, more famous crashed saucer narrative. The file talks about an investigation in January 1949.
So nearly 2 years after the supposed 1947 crash.
Right. It involves Dr. Lincoln La Paz, a well-respected meteorologist. He was investigating an object seen by several people in the Roswell area, which appeared to explode or disintegrate near the Walker Air Force Base.
An explosion near the base. What did the La Paz find?
Well, the really intriguing part is about two men he interviewed in Carma, New Mexico. The report says these men apparently had some knowledge that the unidentified aerial phenomena was not a meteorite.
Implying they knew or suspected it was something else, something manufactured.
That seems to be the implication. However, La Paz conducted searches for debris in several nearby areas, Artesia, Tatum, Kenna, and others. But the searches yielded negative results.
So, no smoking gun, no wreckage found according to this file. But it does confirm an official investigation into an unexplained aerial event near Roswell, with witnesses suggesting it wasn't natural.
Exactly. It plants a flag showing official interest and investigation into something unusual happening near Roswell long before the story blew up in popular culture.
And there were incidents at other military sites too, White Sands.
Yes. White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico cited the first atomic bomb test. A report mentions, in all caps, following and overtaking missiles by UFOs in flight.
Whoa. UFOs interacting with missile tests. Witnessed by whom?
Witnessed by a Colonel J. McLaughlin, according to the document. This is incredibly significant if accurate. It's not just passive observation. It's alleged interaction with advanced military hardware at a key test range.
So taken together, these military and radar reports, they really elevate the phenomenon beyond simple misidentification, don't they?
They absolutely do. When you have trained observers, radar confirmation, sightings at critical national security locations, and reports of interaction with military technology, it becomes much harder to dismiss. It paints a picture of something complex, potentially technological, and definitely unknown operating in sensitive airspace. This is where the mystery, truly, undeniably, met the military.
Okay, let's broaden our scope now to beyond earthly explanations, theories, organizations, and global perspectives. It wasn't just the government grappling with this. The public was actively involved, forming groups demanding answers. Let's look at citizen initiatives and calls for transparency, summed up as our search for the answer.
Right. While the government was often cautious or dismissive, at least publicly, a really energetic grassroots movement sprang up. People weren't just passive observers, they organized.
What kind of organizations?
Groups like Intercontinental Aerial Research, or IRR. We found a document where they put out this incredibly passionate call for observers. They wanted, quote, all persons interested in setting up observer posts who can devote from 1 to 3 hours a day on Skywatch.
Skywatching, like organized surveillance.
Exactly. And who can be relied upon to have their cameras loaded and ready to photograph these objects. They were asking people to be ready to document evidence.
Who are they trying to recruit?
Everyone. They specifically call out adult Skywatch clubs, high school groups, science clubs, industrial groups, and individuals in general, asking them to join us in our search for the answer to the UFOs. It shows this real hunger for information and participation, trying to fill the gap left by official silence or perceived inadequacy.
So citizen science meets UFO hunting. Were these just local groups, or did they have bigger ambitions?
Some had very big ambitions. Another group mentioned is the Intercontinental UFO Observer and Analytic Network, IQUFON. They weren't just thinking locally or nationally.
What were they proposing?
They actually proposed an intercontinental space security pact. And get this, they invited leading scientists to attend a UN conference on the peaceful uses of outer space in Vienna, scheduled for September 1967.
A UN conference. They were aiming high. What was their underlying belief?
They seemed convinced that UFOs represented a tremendous force of potentially extraterrestrial origin, affecting Earth's technology, causing disruptions to radio, TV, electrical grids. They believed this force needed to be understood and engaged with on a global level.
And they had ideas about the intentions of these visitors.
Oh, yes. They referred to space brothers and believed their intentions were largely benevolent. According to ICUFON, these space brothers aimed to basically guide humanity, control Earth's weapons to prevent self-destruction, help us become a spacefaring race, and enlighten us backward Earth brothers towards some kind of cosmic brotherhood.
Wow. That's a pretty grand vision. Moving from simple observation to global transformation guided by aliens.
It's a huge leap. They even claim some articles from their proposed Space Security Pact have been incorporated into the UN's actual treaty on the peaceful uses of outer space, suggesting they felt they were having a real impact on international policy.
Whether real or perceived, that belief is significant. It shows how far some people were taking this, fueled perhaps by skepticism towards the government's narrative.
Absolutely. This drive for citizen involvement, for transparency, for a grander cosmic perspective stands in really stark contrast to the official stance of cautious investigation or outright debunking. It highlights that growing public distrust and the desire for answers that the government didn't seem to be providing.
Which is a perfect segue into the official attempts at explanation or debunking. Let's look at scientific interpretations and debunking attempts. Project Blue Book and beyond. Blue Book was the Air Force's main public effort, right?
That's right. Project Blue Book was the face of the official investigation. They compiled thousands of reports. The files mentioned 12,617 sightings checked since 1947.
And their main conclusion was?
Their main approach was to try and explain sightings using conventional phenomena. They attributed most reports to things like planes, balloons, stars, planets, meteors, even swamp gas, fireworks, or sometimes hallucinations or psychological reasons.
But not everything got explained away.
No. And that's key. Even by their own count, 701 cases remained unexplained, usually cited as due to insufficient information. But having over 700 officially unexplained cases, that kept the mystery alive, didn't it?
Definitely. And there was pressure to do more, wasn't there, for a more independent look?
Yes, significant pressure. The files mention an article noting that pressure had been mounting for the establishment of an independent, civilian-controlled investigative agency. This eventually led the Air Force to commission a study by the University of Colorado.
The Condon Committee.
Exactly. Headed by physicist Dr. Edward U. Condon. It was supposed to be this big, independent scientific assessment, funded for 18 months, cost over $300,000 back then. Interestingly, the study's coordinator, Robert Lowe, is quoted in one document as finding some of the photographic evidence very convincing, which kind of hints at internal complexities even within that effort.
So even the official study wasn't entirely monolithic. Were there other scientific explanations being proposed outside of Blue Book?
Yes. Scientists and engineers were trying to fit these sightings into known physics. Philip Klass, an avionics editor, proposed the ball lightning theory.
Ball lightning. How would that explain UFOs?
His idea was that some sightings, particularly the luminous balls, might be a form of electrical plasma, maybe generated by high-tension power lines, especially during certain weather conditions. It was an attempt to find a natural, if unusual, explanation.
And books were fueling the debate, too.
Oh, yeah. Frank Edwards' book, Flying Saucers: Serious Business, is mentioned as contributing to the controversy. The public was definitely engaged reading these popular accounts alongside the official statements.
But then, countering all the scientific rationalization, there were these other claims, things that defied easy explanation, like that Corendor message.
Right, you have these attempts at scientific explanation, and then you have claims like those attributed to Master Callan-Lee Rattan of Corendor. He dismissed terrestrial science somewhat, claiming that noises and gibberish on radio and TV could actually be voice programs from other planets.
Okay. And he cited a specific anomaly.
A really weird one. He mentioned a broadcast from a Houston TV station, KLEE, supposedly being picked up in England in September 1953. The strange part, KLE had reportedly been off the air for years by that point.
How? How is that even possible?
Rattan's comment was, how did it come out from somewhere it had not been? Nobody knows. If true, it's the kind of anomaly that completely defies conventional physics and communication theory, adds another layer of profound weirdness.
So you have this constant tension. Official explanations, often dismissive, scientific attempts to find natural causes, persistent, unexplained sightings, and then these truly bizarre claims that push the boundaries. It really highlights why this subject remains so contentious.
Exactly. The commissioning of the Condon study shows a need for scientific credibility, but the results were ultimately used, many felt, primarily to debunk. Yet the unexplained reports, the anomalies, the compelling photos or witness accounts, they kept coming. It forces you, the listener, to constantly weigh the evidence and question who to believe and why.
Let's push those boundaries even further now into some of the most profound and speculative material in these files. Ancient echoes and extraterrestrial messages, deep history and modern contact. This isn't just about 1947 anymore.
No, this section really broadens the perspective dramatically. Yeah. It connects the modern UFO phenomenon to deep history and philosophy, suggesting contact isn't new and might even involve direct communication.
Like the ancient evidence mentioned, Chinese caves.
Yes, the files reference reports about the Bayan Karaula caves in the Sino-Tibetan border region, said to be 12,000 years old. Inside, archaeologists supposedly found these stone discs.
The drop of stones.
Possibly related, yes. The file describes them as made of cobalt and other metals that vibrate unusually, a shocking discovery. And even more evocative, cave drawings nearby depicted figures appearing from an egg-shaped object covered with concentric circles, alongside drawings of the sun, moon, and stars.
Suggesting ancient astronauts, basically.
That's the implication. The document also draws parallels with legends from Peru and the Tasaidi people, describing men from the clouds or goddesses of gigantic colonial eggs. It paints a picture of potentially long-standing worldwide interaction with non-earthly visitors.
And it even brings in philosophy, von Braun.
Right. There's a mention attributed to Dr. Werner von Braun, reflecting on science and religion becoming adversaries, yet both seeking truth, science, in nature, religion, in humanity. It suggests encountering the vastness of the universe, potentially including other intelligences, forces humility, and maybe even a reconciliation of science and deeper meaning. It adds this whole philosophical weight to the idea of contact.
Okay, from ancient echoes to modern messages. Tell us about that Kurender message. That sounds like something else entirely.
It really is. This is an alleged direct communication received via special directional shortwave radio on May 11, 1966, from someone calling himself Master Kellen Lee Ritan, head of the Kurender.
And what was the message? Peace and love?
More than that. It claimed direct interference in Earth's affairs, mentioning the U.S., China, Russia, Vietnam, stating that stepping in is required to prevent disaster. They claim they have infiltrated your planet and are directly involved in Earth's life.
Whoa, infiltrated. That sounds less like benevolent space brothers and more like something else. What else did they say?
They talked about their language, Galingua, being rhythmic, musical, derived from a universal tongue, and even claimed ancient Latin and modern English have roots on other planets. The core message urged humanity to evolve. Open up your minds and eyes. Don't waste precious hours and days in bigotry and ignorance and in senseless fighting and killing.
Okay, so a call for enlightenment. Did they offer solutions?
They did. They promoted a non-money economic system known as universal economics, essentially offering a blueprint for a completely different, supposedly more advanced way of life based on cosmic principles. It's a radical utopian vision allegedly delivered via shortwave radio.
That's quite a claim. And there were individuals claiming ongoing personal contact, too, like Fred Stickling, the guy with the film.
Yes. Fred Stickling claimed he met regularly with the brothers. He said he didn't ask questions, but just listened, implying they controlled the information flow. He said he could see one of them several times a week and knew where he's working, though he wouldn't specify where. He also claimed to have filmed an armada of 40 to 50 UFOs in Germany.
An armada and Hope Troxel.
Hope Troxel, founder of a group called the School of Thought. She reported experiencing partial blackouts in 2 California towns, Bishop and Lone Pine, during what she called an evening channel telepathic session she was having with the Space Brothers.
Telepathic sessions causing blackouts. What did the brothers supposedly say?
According to her report, they told those present, "Don't be afraid. We are guardians of the race. Protection will be given to those in the area."
Yeah.
Again, this theme of benevolent guardianship.
So this section takes us way beyond just lights in the sky. We're talking ancient history, direct messages, claims of infiltration, telepathic contact, even new economic systems. It really expands the potential meaning of UFOs into something profoundly philosophical and potentially transformative.
Absolutely. It shifts the frame from mere unidentified objects to potential non-human intelligences interacting with humanity across millennia, possibly guiding, warning, or even intervening in our affairs.
Yeah.
Whether you believe these accounts or not, their presence in the file shows the incredible breadth of ideas the UFO phenomenon was already generating in these early decades.
Okay, let's bring it back down to earth, or at least back to the government's perspective. We need to look at the government's dilemma: secrecy, control, and public trust. How are they handling this internally? Let's start with internal discussions and classified conclusions. The Watch Committee's stance.
Right. So behind the scenes, away from public statements, high-level intelligence committees were discussing the phenomenon, and sometimes reaching conclusions that seem, well, contradictory or based on limited evidence.
Like what?
There's a memo from September 1957 detailing a meeting of the Intelligence Advisory Committee Watch Committee, a very high-level group, they were apparently told.
Like,
The information came from the U.S. Air Defense Command, ADC, and was relayed to the White House. And ADC was telling the Watch Committee that a Soviet operation is responsible for the unidentified flying object reports of September 1957.
the Soviets. Again. So during the height of the Cold War, the default explanation for UFOs, even at the highest levels, was Russian secret weapons.
It certainly seems to have been a go-to explanation, yes. It reflects the intense paranoia and the lens through which everything unknown was viewed at the time. Anything strange in the sky must be the adversary.
But did they have proof? Did the Watch Committee buy it?
That's the fascinating part. According to the same memo, despite being told it was a Soviet operation, the committee also concluded that, quote, it is highly improbable.
Why?
Because, quote, there is no intelligence on activities which can be related to a missile launching of this type by the Soviets. Their own intelligence didn't support the claim being fed to them by Air Defense Command.
So you have this internal contradiction right there in the files. ADC says Soviets. The Intel Advisory Committee says improbable based on lack of evidence. What does that tell us?
It's incredibly revealing and shows internal disagreement and a struggle to explain these things. It suggests explanations were sometimes offered, maybe even pushed, based on presumption or perhaps political expediency rather than solid intelligence. This internal conflict between convenient explanations and the actual lack of supporting data is critical to understanding the government's internal posture and why public skepticism about official narratives eventually grew so strong.
And these internal debates and sometimes shaky conclusions inevitably affected how the government communicated with the public, which leads us to the information game. Managing public perception. They weren't just investigating, they were managing information, right?
Oh, absolutely. There was a clear awareness within official circles about public anxiety and the need to shape the narrative, often through downplaying events or offering explanations that critics saw as deliberate debunking.
Was this acknowledged politically?
It seems so. The files mention Congressman Gerald Ford, later President Ford, of course suggesting that Congress should investigate UFOs. Why? Because he believed such an investigation would make the American people feel better.
Feel better, not necessarily find the truth, but provide reassurance.
That seems to be the implication. It suggests a focus on public perception management, on alleviating anxiety, as much as on uncovering facts. The goal was partly therapeutic, you could say.
But people weren't always reassured. Some were clearly distrustful of the official line, especially the Air Force's denials.
Definitely. We see that reflected in correspondence. One anonymous person wrote expressing concern, saying they didn't think the Air Force isn't lying. A double negative suggesting they did think they were lying. This person noted even FBI agents have seen UFOs, and this has been denied by the Air Force.
And there were personal consequences for witnesses who spoke out.
Yes, tragically. The same correspondent mentioned a pilot, who was also a police officer, having serious family trouble, as well as being ridiculed by people, simply because he reported a sighting. This highlights the social stigma and the real harm caused by official dismissals and public ridicule.
And critics like Major Donald Kehoe were calling out the secrecy directly.
Loudly and persistently. Kehoe is quoted stating, "The public could not accept this knowledge." He complained, "They won't give you details. If they did, many of their explanations would fall apart." He was directly accusing the Air Force of withholding information because their explanations wouldn't hold up under scrutiny.
And even within the government, there was concern about misinformation, but maybe from a different angle.
Right. There's a Naval Intelligence report discussing a planned article for Look magazine by a writer named Dick Wilson. Wilson apparently sought FBI clearance to mention the Bureau, his rationale. He believed his article, presumably offering conventional explanations, would save the Bureau time and expense in running down numerous reported leads regarding balloons or reported saucers.
So he saw his debunking article as helpful to the government.
Yes, and he also expressed concern that the release of erroneous information by amateur scientists concerning flying saucers had nearly financed moves of hysteria among the public. So from his perspective, managing information was about preventing public panic caused by unfounded speculation.
It really shows the complexity. The government wasn't just investigating objects, it was navigating public fear, witness credibility, internal disagreements, Cold War paranoia, and the desire to maintain control over sensitive information. It was an information game from the start.
Precisely. This underscores that difficult relationship between government, secrecy, national security concerns, and public trust. The truth, whatever it was, often seems secondary to managing the narrative and maintaining stability. These early dynamics set the stage for decades of controversy, cover-up theories, and the enduring mystery of UFOs.
Wow, what an incredible journey through these early FBI files. We've covered so much from those meticulous reporting forms.
Right, the level of detail they saw was amazing.
To the absolutely wild claims of royal encounters with contactees like Adamski, the echoes of ancient aliens, even direct messages from Corendor.
It really shows the sheer breadth of the phenomenon right from the start. It wasn't just one thing. It was sightings, it was contact claims, it was high strangeness like missing time.
And mixed into all that, the hard data the radar hits, the visual confirmations by military personnel at places like Oak Ridge and White Sands.
Exactly. It demonstrates that this wasn't just folklore or misidentification. There were credible reports from sensitive locations that genuinely perplexed the authorities.
This deep dive really hammers home that the UFO phenomenon, from its modern birth, was instantly tangled up with everything: national security, public fear, scientific curiosity.
Yeah, and those really deep, almost philosophical questions about our place in the cosmos. The FBI's role, even if officially limited to fact-finding and referrals, acts like a mirror, reflecting how deeply these sightings permeated different levels of government and society.
And it's so clear how blurred the lines were from day one. The line between explainable, maybe unusual, and truly profoundly unknown. The government struggled to categorize it all, to control the information.
That struggle really set the stage for decades of debate, didn't it? It created the environment where mystery could thrive.
We saw the public desperate for answers, met with official caution, sometimes seeming like deliberate secrecy. That whole dynamic.
That legacy is still with us. It continues to shape how we talk about, investigate, and understand, or maybe misunderstand, these phenomena today. Questions of transparency, trust, they haven't gone away.
Absolutely. So as we close out this exploration of the FBI files and the dawn of the modern UFO era, here's something to think about. If these early official documents, even with their limitations, hinted at such profound and diverse possibilities from advanced tech to ancient contact, what else might still be out there? What haven't we seen?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? And maybe it leads to another one. In today's world, absolutely flooded with information, how do we even begin to discern what's true? Especially when the truth might be something authorities even now might deem too unsettling, too disruptive for us to handle. The start of the modern UFO phenomenon documented in these files doesn't just challenge us to look up. It challenges us to look inward, to critically examine the stories we're told by governments, by scientists, by contactees, by ourselves about what might really be out there.
A powerful thought indeed. Plenty to mull over until our next deep dive.